We've taken steps in terms of increasing our presence in Camp Sullivan so that we have better situational awareness of what is happening there.
From the more fallout today from the worst frat party on earth. Photos of Wackenhut contractors who are supposedly responsible for guarding the most important American building anywhere in the world outside of the United States. Thanks to these whistleblower photos of contractors simulating sex and posing nude and drinking vodka out of Slot B, the State Department has decided to send diplomatic security personnel to oversee these contractors. So, if you're keeping track at home, that means we replaced guards with contractors who we now have to have overseen by more guards to make sure the contractors are not doing this instead of guarding the embassy. How efficient. 2 years ago, the State Department under Condoleezza Rice investigated this contract and warned the company that because of their conduct, quote, the security of the U.S. Embassy in Kabul is in jeopardy. A follow-up Senate report called the Kabul Embassy contract, quote, deficient since the start of the contract in 2007. The State Department issued this company what's called a cure notice back in July 2007, telling them essentially to shape up or risk losing the contract. 8 months later, in April 2008, they got an even sterner warning that they hadn't shaped up at all and they really better. Then the following July, they got their contract renewed. Now, because of the photographic evidence provided to the government by the Project on Government Oversight, this nonprofit watchdog group, which has a history of supporting government whistleblowers, the State Department is now starting to take action. Given the horrible track record of this company, why did it take photos from a watchdog group to get the State Department to send in the adults here? And what's happening to the whistleblowers inside this company who are the reason that we've got these photos now in the first place? Joining us now is Danielle Bryan, Executive Director of the Project on Government Oversight, the watchdog group that exposed this latest contractor scandal. Ms. Bryan, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. You asked exactly the right questions.
Well, let's get to the answers then. Let me ask you first about why the State Department is acting now. It seems like there's this incredible State Department and congressional record of these contractors getting called on their nonsense, but still they've got the contract.
Yeah, and you know, I've actually just found today even more outrageous news. I've got emails today from a guard who is still there showing that in 2007, he was raising concerns about some of these supervisors who were over in training in the U.S., and he was saying back then, 2 years ago, these guys are weird. They are doing weird, deviant hazing. We need to do something about it. And the supervisors reported this to the State Department in 2007.
So he reported that to the government. He didn't report that just up the chain of command in Wackenhut. He reported that to the government then?
Well, it was sort of a leapfrog. He reported it to a supervisor. This is actually even more incredible. A supervisor within Wackenhut at the time, it was actually Armor Group, and that guy reports it to the State Department. That guy gets fired. He becomes a whistleblower and has a suit against them.
Pogo today, your group today, put out a press release saying that one of the whistleblowers was forced to resign in an act of retaliation by the company. Is that case that you're talking about?
No, that's another one. That's a guy that just happened in the last 2 days. So one of my biggest worries is the good guys are still the ones who are really in danger and are taking the fall. The bad guys are not yet being held accountable.
Well, about these bad guys, I mean, has anything happened to the supervisors that these whistleblowers are blowing the whistle on? The people who created this environment at the embassy, the people who are responsible for this culture of hazing, apparently they have sort of been named and shamed by people within that company. What's happened to them since this stuff has been outed?
Well, 3 of them have been allowed to quietly resign. One of them had, just last week, a big celebratory goodbye party from his colleagues, and they're off, looking for new contracts, probably for the U.S. government somewhere else. So they've already been able to resign without being held accountable.
How do the whistleblowers come to you? Pogo is a good government group. You deal with whistleblowers a lot about things gone wrong. How do these employees of this company find their way to you, and how do you make sure, or try to make sure, that they're protected after they give you information?
Well, that's actually an incredibly important point, because it's really hard to protect these guys. For example, this guy right now who's been forced out of a job, the laws are going to be really hard to help this guy, and that's one of the things we're working on, is to strengthen those laws. But it was sort of a one-at-a-time situation where after one reached out to us, we were talking to him, then he encouraged others to come to us, and now we're up to, I think, 20 of the English-speaking guards that we've talked to. So it's really important to point out that there are really bizarre, deviant things going on, but the reason we know about this is that some of these contractors have really risked a lot to come out.
Right. So what we've got right now is we've got information, as you say, that's just come up in the last couple of days about this type of behavior being reported as recently as as far back as 2007.
Right.
We've got 2007 investigation by the State Department. We've got a follow-up investigation by the Senate. We've got, in the midst of all of this, a re-upping of the contract for these guys. What's your take on how the State Department now is handling this? Obviously, the track record was bad. The contract was re-upped this past summer. But what do you think about the way they've responded to you now and what they're doing in terms of taking remedial action?
Well, I was happy to just get a call about an hour or two ago from the State Department that actually the number 3 at the embassy is asked to come over to be briefed by us at POGO next week. So that's a good sign. What worries me, though, is I've had an email that was circulated to all the guards that told them that while State Department investigators are there interviewing all the people at the base, they are not allowed to speak to a State Department investigator without a supervisor being there with them.
Whoa.
So I don't have a lot of faith that the State Department's going to be able to dig up much on their own.
And if this was some vending contract, you know, at a train station somewhere, this would be annoying enough. But the fact that this is the protection of what I think is probably the most important American building anywhere outside of America, the idea that the company might be able to interfere with our ability to get this right, not only to make sure there's accountability here, but to make sure that the safety concerns of the people who work at that embassy are met. I have to say it's infuriating. Let me ask you one, I guess, slightly bigger picture question. You deal with whistleblowers a lot about things gone wrong. Things gone wrong when the public is paying.
Yeah.
Is it harder to pursue accountability generally when government functions are contracted out to private companies? Does that create another layer of insulation for people who act criminally or inappropriately or wastefully on the taxpayers' dime?
I think there's no question that that's a huge issue. That's one of the issues that we raised in our letter to Secretary Clinton was, is this really the right place in this case to be having contractors? It really creates a difficult ability to hold them accountable, and that's true in any of these situations.
Danielle Bryan, Executive Director of the Project on Government Oversight, the watchdog group that exposed the latest contractor scandal. They're online at pogo.org. Danielle, I would just say that not only is POGO doing good work here, you personally are doing really good work communicating the important issues about it. And I think it's your credit to the organization and to the overall cause. So thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot.